The clang of the metal door echoed through the icy basement like a final sentence. Absolute darkness swallowed everything. Liam, 8, held the trembling hand of his sister, Sophia, 6, as the cold of the concrete floor seeped through their thin clothes. Above them, Christmas music and laughter drifted down from the manor. The most glamorous party in the city was in full swing. The thermometer on the wall read 35°F, but no one upstairs knew that down below, 2 children were fighting not to freeze. She was a billionaire's second wife, and in the eyes of society, Victoria Ashford was the perfect stepmother. Elegant, charismatic, always with the right smile for the cameras and the perfect words to impress. But behind the doors of the imposing Blackwood Manor, she hid a dark secret no one would dare believe. Liam and Sophia, children from Richard Blackwood's first marriage, had been suffering in silence since the day she entered their lives. After all, who would believe 2 children speaking out against a woman so respected and admired? On Christmas Eve of 2024, during the most important annual party on the corporate elite's social calendar, Victoria made the mistake that would change everything. She locked her stepchildren in the freezing basement of the manor, believing she could hide her cruelty for just a few more hours. What she didn't know was that someone was listening to the muffled screams through the floorboards, and when that metal door was finally thrown open in front of 50 high society guests, there was no longer any way to hide the truth. This is the true story of how an act of cruelty was exposed in the most public and devastating way possible. It's about how 2 children, silenced for months, were finally heard when all seemed lost. But it is also a story about all the silent witnesses who chose day after day to ignore the signs. Because sometimes, the most vicious abuse happens exactly where no one imagines. Inside picture-perfect homes, in seemingly flawless families, hidden behind smiles rehearsed for social media. How many perfect parties hide horrors in the basements of mansions? How many children cry for help in silence, while the adults around them choose not to see? What would you do if during an elegant celebration you heard a desperate cry coming from the floor below? These are the questions that would forever haunt every guest from that Christmas night. Because when the truth finally erupted, no one could pretend they didn't know anymore. Blackwood Manor glittered with 10,000 Christmas lights that cold December night. A 15-foot tree dominated the main hall, decorated with imported ornaments and crystal baubles that reflected the light of the $3 million chandelier. Crystal glasses clinked with French champagne as waiters circulated with caviar canapes. The contrast could not have been more brutal. While the elite celebrated in absolute luxury in the damp and freezing basement, 2 children clung to each other, trembling, desperately trying to preserve their body heat to survive. Not all abuse leaves visible marks that doctors can document in reports. Not every cruel stepmother uses her fists or raises her voice in public. The worst cruelties, the most calculated and devastating ones, happen far from the world's eyes. They happen in homes where no one would suspect, carried out by people who know exactly how to maintain a flawless facade. Victoria had perfected this art over 6 months, but on that night, her mask would finally fall. It was December 24th, 2024, Christmas Eve, and the Blackwood family's annual party brought together the most influential people in the city. Politicians, business moguls, judges all were present in the 20,000 square foot mansion, located in the region's most exclusive gated community. Richard Blackwood, at 42, was one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the real estate sector, and his Christmas party was the event of the year. But while he toasted with his guests upstairs, his children were fighting to survive downstairs. When that door opened, it wasn't just the children who were set free, it was the truth. This sentence would later echo through the courthouse corridors, in newspaper headlines, and in whispered conversations within the elite social circles, because on that night, 50 witnesses saw with their own eyes what happens when the veneer of perfection shatters completely. And no one would ever forget the image of 2 children being carried out of the basement, shivering from the cold, their lips purple and their eyes empty, like those who had already given up on asking for help. Before we continue with this story that will keep you hooked until the end, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. Oh, and comment below where you're watching from. We love knowing that people from all over the country are following these true stories. Now let's go back 6 months before that terrible night to understand how it all began. 6 months before that fateful Christmas Eve, On a sunny day in June, Richard Blackwood parked his BMW in the Manor's garage with a smile his children hadn't seen in a long time. Liam and Sophia waited nervously in the living room, while the housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, adjusted the same sofa cushions for the 10th time. "Kids, come meet someone very special," Richard called, and through the door walked Victoria Ashford, vibrant, energetic in a red dress that seemed to scream life. She was everything his late wife hadn't been able to be in her final years of battling cancer: present, smiling, radiant. Liam watched the woman with the analytical eyes of a child who had grown up too fast. He was only 8, but shouldering the responsibility of protecting his younger sister during their mother's illness had forced him to mature too soon. Sophia, at 6, still looked for her mother in every room of the house, still expected her to return from the long trip, as her father had explained. The grief was fresh. It had only been a year since the funeral, and now here was this strange woman, occupying a space that still felt sacred. "Hello, my darlings. I've heard so much about you." Victoria knelt with theatrical enthusiasm, opening her arms as if expecting immediate hugs. Liam took a step forward, instinctively shielding his sister, who hid behind him. "Hello," he replied politely, but kept his distance, exactly as his mother had taught him about strangers. Victoria noticed the subtle rejection, and for a fraction of a second, something cold flickered in her eyes before the smile returned, even wider. Richard Blackwood was a man obsessed with results, both in business and in his personal life. At 42, he had built a real estate empire from scratch, but the price was high. He traveled 15 days a month, had missed his wife's final moments, and was now trying to fill the void with speed. 3 months after that first meeting, he announced, "We're getting married. You're going to have a mother again." Liam tried to protest, "But Dad, we barely know her." Richard, already packing for a 2-week honeymoon, just ruffled his son's hair. "You'll see, son. She'll take good care of you." Blackwood Manor was a monument to success. 3 floors, 12 bedrooms, a heated pool, a private cinema. The basement, originally designed as a cellar for rare wines, had reinforced walls to maintain a stable temperature and perfect sound insulation. It was ironic how that space, built to preserve valuable things, would become a prison. The Golden Gates estate had 24-hour security, guardhouses, cameras on every corner, but no cameras pointed inside the homes, where the real dangers sometimes lurked. Victoria Ashford was 32 and had a carefully edited story. She claimed to be from a traditional family from the countryside that had lost everything in bad investments. The truth was, she had grown up in a modest house, always envying the rich girls at the private school she attended on a scholarship. At 18, she swore she would be wealthy no matter how. At 32, Richard Blackwood was her winning lottery ticket, and she wouldn't let 2 spoiled children get in the way of her plans. Mrs. Gable was 60 and had worked for the Blackwood family for 15 years. She had cared for the first wife during her illness, rocked Sophia as a baby, and taught Liam how to tie his shoes. When Victoria arrived, Mrs. Gable immediately sensed something was wrong. It was the instinct of someone who had raised children and grandchildren. But she needed that job. She had a granddaughter with a disability who depended on the health insurance it provided. So, when she began to notice the first subtle cruelties, Mrs. Gable chose silence, a choice that would haunt her for months. Robert, the 45-year-old night security guard, was a former police officer who had retired on disability after being shot in the shoulder during an operation. He liked the quiet work at the estate, making rounds, checking perimeters, going home to his wife and 7-year-old son. Robert was observant by training. He noticed things others ignored, and he began to notice, week after week, how Liam and Sophia seemed smaller, more faded, as if they were disappearing even while standing right there. The honeymoon lasted 2 weeks, and they were the longest 2 weeks of Liam and Sophia's lives. The day after Richard left, Victoria waited for the limousine to disappear around the bend. Then she walked into the living room where the children were watching cartoons and abruptly turned off the TV. "Now we're going to establish my rules," she said, in a voice they had never heard before, cold, metallic, with no trace of her previous enthusiasm. She confiscated their tablets, their favorite toys, and the framed photos of their mother that decorated their rooms. That woman doesn't exist anymore. Now I am your mother." Sophia started to cry, and Victoria knelt until she was at the girl's eye level. "Cry again, and you'll find out what real punishment is," she whispered so softly that Liam could barely hear. But he heard enough, and in that moment, at 8 years old, Liam knew they were completely alone. Their father was thousands of miles away on some paradise beach. The only witness was Mrs. Gable, who at that very moment was cleaning upstairs and pretending, or perhaps truly choosing not to hear. Life as they knew it was over, and no one was coming to save them. Not yet. The first week after the wedding unfolded like a silent countdown. Richard left for his business trip on Monday morning, full of promises. "I'll be back Friday, my loves. Victoria will take great care of you." The limousine disappeared beyond the gates, and Liam's stomach churned, that instinctive feeling children get when they know something bad is about to happen. Victoria watched from the window until the car was completely out of sight. Then she turned, and the loving stepmother mask slid from her face like cheap makeup in the rain. "Now the rules are mine," she declared, walking slowly toward the children like a predator that has finally cornered its prey. In 2 hours, she had turned the house into a prison. She confiscated tablets, video games, and favorite books. The photos of their biological mother vanished from the walls and were locked in a box in the storage room. "That woman is the past. I am the present and the future of this family. The sooner you understand that, the better for you," she said, as she tore the last picture frame from Sophia's trembling hands. Liam waited until night, when Victoria finally locked herself in the master bedroom. He picked up the kitchen landline with sweaty hands and dialed his father's cell phone number. 3 rings. 4. "Hello, son. Is everything okay there?" Richard's cheerful voice brought tears to Liam's eyes. "Dad, Victoria is... She took all of Mom's things and..." Click. The line went dead. Liam looked up and saw Victoria at the top of the stairs, holding the cordless phone from its base. "Did the call drop? What a shame," she said with an icy smile. When Richard called back minutes later, it was Victoria who answered, all sweet and concerned. "Honey, Liam was a little agitated, you know. I think it's jealousy, an adjustment thing. The child psychologist said it's totally normal. I explained that I just reorganized a few things to make the house feel more ours, you know." Richard, on the other end, tired from meetings, accepted the explanation without question. Liam heard everything from the hallway. That's when he learned the first cruel lesson. Her word was worth more than their truth. The following weeks brought a gradual and calculated escalation of punishments. Victoria was too strategic to leave visible marks, no slaps or bruises that doctors could document. She used methods that left no physical evidence. Standing in a corner for hours until their legs shook, skipping meals as discipline, sleeping without a blanket in the cold air conditioning as a consequence for disobedience. Always when Richard was traveling, always with no witnesses besides Mrs. Gable, who cleaned the rooms with her eyes fixed on the floor. It was on a rainy afternoon in July that Mrs. Gable witnessed the scene that would haunt her for the next few months. She entered the kitchen to get cleaning supplies and found Sophia sitting alone at the table at 3 in the afternoon, eating cold rice and hardened beans from the previous day's lunch. In the adjacent dining room, Victoria was savoring fresh lobster with herb butter, French white wine, and a passion fruit mousse for dessert. "Spoiled children need to learn the value of things," Victoria said, when she noticed Mrs. Gable standing in the doorway. The housekeeper opened her mouth, closed it, and opened it again. Nothing came out. She lowered her eyes and returned to her duties. She needed that job. Her granddaughter needed the medical appointments. She hated herself for it, but she carried on. Liam, with his quiet, observant child's intelligence, understood they needed outside help. He spent a whole night writing a note in his neat second-grade handwriting. "Please help. Our stepmom hurts us. My dad doesn't believe us. Please." He folded the paper into a tiny square and waited for his chance. When Robert, the security guard, came to check on a delivery at the service gate, Liam ran over and tried to hand him the note. "Mr. Robert, please, can you—" A firm hand grabbed his shoulder. Victoria had appeared out of nowhere. "Thank you, Robert. I'll take that." She snatched the paper from the boy's hand, read it quickly and smiled at the guard. A love note for his little school girlfriend. How cute, right? She'll save it to show his father. The punishment came that night. 4 hours locked in the downstairs guest bathroom with no light, in complete darkness. Sophia cried for the first 40 minutes until she had no tears left. Liam held her on the cold floor, softly singing the songs their mother used to sing, trying to be strong while his own heart pounded with panic. When Victoria finally opened the door at 11 o'clock, she bent down and whispered in a terrifyingly calm voice, "Try anything like that again, asking anyone for help, and you will discover a place much worse than this little bathroom. Understood?" They understood. Asking for help was dangerous. They were on their own. 2 weeks later, during a seemingly normal dinner, Victoria made a casual announcement. "Richard, darling, I was thinking, wouldn't it be better to put the children in a school more suited to our new status? That little public school they attend is so common." Richard, flipping through contracts on his iPad, didn't even look up. "You decide, dear. You understand these things better than I do." Liam felt the floor disappear from under his feet. That school was the last place where anyone still knew their life before Victoria. Mrs. Davis, who had been friends with his mother. Principal Miller, who would ask how they were adjusting. The friends who knew their history. Everything was about to vanish. The following Monday, Liam and Sophia walked into Millennium Elite Academy for the first time, a luxury private school, where every student was the child of business leaders, diplomats, and celebrities. No one there knew the Liam who loved playing soccer at recess. No one knew the Sophia who drew flowers and butterflies in all her notebooks. To the new teachers and classmates, they were just the Blackwood kids, the quiet ones. No one noticed when Liam stopped smiling completely. No one noticed when Sophia started wetting the Beda classic sign of trauma that her stepmother used as more proof that the children were problematic. Their last support network had been cut off. And Victoria, watching from the car window on that first day of school, smiled with satisfaction. Now they were completely hers, and no one in the world would know what happened inside the perfect mansion. November arrived with its promises of parties and celebrations, and Victoria made an announcement during breakfast that made Richard smile with pride. "Darling, I want to throw the most spectacular Christmas party this city has ever seen, something everyone will be talking about for years." Richard kissed her forehead. "I love the idea. Unlimited budget. You can do whatever you want." What he didn't notice was the calculating gleam in his wife's eyes. That party wasn't about Christmas or family. It was about cementing her position among the elite, ensuring everyone saw her as the perfect wife, the dedicated stepmother. And sad, thin, frightened children didn't fit the image she needed to project. The obsession with the perfect party took over the house. Decorators came and went daily. Canap samples were tested and discarded. Victoria interviewed 6 catering companies before choosing the most expensive and renowned one. But as the mansion transformed into a Christmas fairy tale, Liam and Sophia became obstacles to be managed. "You will look beautiful for the photos," Victoria decreed, "and you will smile as if this is the best family in the world. Because if you don't smile..." She left the threat hanging in the air, and they knew enough by now to fear what would come next. It was during these preparations that the moment occurred that would prove just how far Victoria was willing to go. Sophia woke up one Tuesday with a high fever, the kind that makes the skin burn to the touch. Sophia woke up one Tuesday with a high fever, the kind that makes the skin burn to the touch. Liam ran to Mrs. Gable in a panic. "She's burning up. She needs medicine." But before the housekeeper could act, Victoria appeared in the room. "Today is the photo shoot for the Christmas card. The photographer is already on his way." She pulled Sophia out of bed, took her to the bathroom, and began to apply heavy makeup. Foundation, blush, lipstick layer after layer, hiding her sickly pallor. The photo shoot lasted 2 hours. Sophia, with 102F fever, was positioned between Victoria and Richard, forced to smile while the lights of the makeshift studio made her fever climb even higher. "More joy, Sophia. It's Christmas," the photographer encouraged, unaware that the girl was on the verge of fainting. Liam held his sister's hand during the photos, squeezing it 3 times, the secret code they had created. "I'm here. You're not alone." When they finished, Victoria posted the winning photo on social media. "My beautiful family, first Christmas together. It's a blessed, perfect family." The photo went viral. 15,000 likes, 340 comments. "Most beautiful family. What a lucky stepmother. You are an inspiration." Meanwhile, Sophia finally received fever reducer, but only after Richard called on video and asked why his daughter wasn't in the frame. External obstacles began to pile up, increasing the pressure on Victoria. Richard confirmed he would definitely be at the party. "I wouldn't miss it for the world. It will be our first Christmas as a complete family," which meant she would have to maintain the perfect facade for at least 6 straight hours. Even worse, his paternal grandmother, Marissa, called to announce she was coming from out of town, especially for the celebration. Marissa had never approved of the quick marriage and had asked inconvenient questions about getting to know Victoria better before Richard married her. Her presence was a threat. Internally, each person in the house faced their own devastating conflicts. Liam, at 8, wrestled with an impossible dilemma every night. Should he protect Sophia even if it resulted in worse punishments for both of them? Or should he obey Victoria and keep his sister safe through submission? Sophia, for her part, had stopped speaking entirely inside the house, a classic selective mutism from severe trauma. She only whispered to Liam when they were alone in their room. Mrs. Gable woke up at 3 in the morning from nightmares of children asking for help. Robert would pass by the security cameras and see Liam and Sophia in the garden, always with their heads down, always isolated, and wonder, am I seeing too much or too little? It was Victoria, however, who devised the most sinister strategy. One afternoon, while researching on her computer with the door locked, she found the solution. A mild children's sedative sold online without a prescription, promising peaceful sleep and a balanced mood for anxious children. She ordered 3 bottles, received them in discreet packaging, and decided to test the doses 2 weeks before the party. On a Thursday night, she mixed half a spoonful of the clear liquid into the children's orange juice. "Drink it all. It's good for you." Sophia slept for 14 straight hours, so deeply that Liam panicked and checked her breathing every hour. Victoria noted in a hidden notebook, "Half a dose can't too strong. 1/3 of a dose should keep them calm but functional." If you're following this story and feeling the tension rise, hit that like button to let us know you're with us on this journey. And comment below, have you ever witnessed signs of abuse being ignored? Sometimes sharing experiences helps us understand we're not alone. Now let's see how Liam will react to his next discovery. 1 week before the party, while Victoria was at the beauty salon, Liam decided to look for anything he could use as proof of what was happening. He searched his stepmother's room, looking over his shoulder every second. That's when he found them, hidden at the back of her lingerie drawer. 3 medicine bottles with English labels and a notebook with notes on dosages. His heart pounded when he understood she was planning to drug them. Liam took the bottles, ran to the bathroom, and poured the entire contents down the toilet. He hid the empty bottles behind a stack of old towels in the laundry room closet. He thought he had saved himself and his sister. But Victoria noticed that same day. She always kept track of everything, every object, every detail. When she opened the drawer that night and saw the bottles out of place, she knew. And when she checked and found them empty, the fury that consumed her was cold and calculated. She went down to Liam's room at 11 o'clock, woke him with a painful grip on his arm and dragged him out. "You think you're smart? You think you can sabotage me?" She took him to the basement, the first time he was exposed to the place that would become the scene of his nightmare. 2 hours there, in the cold, in the dark, was a rehearsal, as she called it. "The party is coming, and you will behave perfectly. This was just a taste of what happens if you disobey." The dynamics in the house were changing in ways perceptible to anyone paying attention. Mrs. Gable, who used to find Liam reading in the library, now only saw him staring into space. Sophia, who used to draw compulsively, had stopped completely. Her notebooks had been blank for weeks. Robert noticed that when Victoria approached the children in the garden, they would literally shrink, like animals expecting a blow. He commented to Mrs. Gable during a delivery, "Those children are afraid of her. Real fear." The housekeeper just sighed deeply. "I know. God forgive me, but I know." But neither of them acted. Not yet. The fear of losing their jobs, of causing trouble, of being wrong, kept them both paralyzed. Christmas Eve arrived. The mansion was transformed into a cinematic set. 10,000 lights, imported decorations, a tree touching the ceiling. Teams had been working since 5 in the morning, setting up heated tents in the garden, testing the sound system, polishing every surface until it gleamed. Victoria rehearsed with Liam and Sophia in the afternoon. "You will come down at 7 p.m. Greet the guests with Merry Christmas. Smile for the photos. Do not speak unless you are asked something. And when I do this," she snapped her fingers twice, "you go immediately up to your room and make no noise. Understood?" They rehearsed it 10 times. Liam memorized every word, every movement. Sophia just nodded, mute, with silent tears streaming down her face, which she had learned not to let make a sound. But Victoria's real plan was even more sinister than Liam imagined. After Richard went to get ready, and she was alone in the kitchen with the children, she revealed the truth. Change of plans. "You appear for half an hour, just for photos. Then you'll stay in the basement until the party is over." Liam felt his blood run cold. "But it's really cold down there." Victoria bent down until she was at his eye level, and what Liam saw there wasn't even anger, it was absolute indifference. "Exactly. That way you'll stay quiet and won't risk ruining my perfect night with your sad little faces or strange looks. I'll leave a thin blanket. You won't die, I'm not stupid enough for that. But you will learn once and for all who is in charge here." Liam looked at Sophia, who was trembling with anticipated fear. He held his sister's hand, and for the first time in months he thought, "Someone has to hear us. Someone has to see us. Please God, let someone find us today." At 7 p.m. sharp, the first guests began to arrive in limousines and luxury cars. The valet parking team worked at a frantic pace as men in tuxedos and women in ball gowns ascended the marble steps of Blackwood Manor. Liam and Sophia were positioned in the entrance hall, dressed like department store mannequins, he in a navy blue suit, she in a red velvet dress. Victoria had given the children a third of a dose of the sedative she had managed to buy again, enough to keep them calm and smiling, but still functional. Their eyes had that glassy sheen of someone slightly anesthetized from reality. "What beautiful children!" a businesswoman exclaimed, pinching Sophia's cheeks. "Hello," Sophia replied in a robotic voice, the rehearsed smile lasting exactly 3 seconds before vanishing. Liam greeted each guest one by one with a firm handshake, as Victoria had practiced. "Merry Christmas. Welcome to our home." Inside, he repeated a silent mantra. Survive the next hour. Just survive. The hired professional photographer circulated, capturing spontaneous moments. Richard, with his hand on his children's shoulders, Victoria kissing Sophia's forehead, the perfect family gathered under the giant tree. Every click of the camera was a documented lie. At 7:30 p.m., after exactly 30 minutes of performance, Victoria approached the children with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She snapped her fingers twice, the agreed-upon signal. "Come on, children. Time to let the adults talk," she said loud enough to sound like a caring mother putting her kids to bed. But instead of going up the main staircase to their rooms, Victoria discreetly led them through the kitchen, where the frantic movement of the catering staff meant no one was paying attention. Mrs. Gable caught a glimpse, but she was too busy arranging platters, or that's what she told herself. The stairs to the basement were behind a discreet door that most guests didn't even know existed. Victoria opened it, turned on the dim light that illuminated only the concrete steps, and pushed Liam and Sophia inside. "Go down." Her voice was a command with no room for negotiation. When they reached the bottom, in the empty space where shelves of rare wines once stood, the reality of the place hit them. Concrete walls that wept with moisture, a tiny high window sealed with glass bricks, and a penetrating cold that went straight to the bone. Victoria threw a thin blanket on the floor. "Behave and stay quiet. I'll be back when the party's over. Should be about 5 or 6 hours. Please, Liam tried one last time, his voice breaking. It's too cold. Sophia will get sick. Victoria was already on the steps, her back to him. She paused, turned her head and said with chilling coldness, "You should have thought of that before you spent months trying to sabotage me. You almost ruined everything by looking sad in the photos. Now you're going to learn." The metal door slammed shut. The sound of the key turning in the lock echoed like a sentence. Then, the noise of a padlock being snapped shut from the outside. Almost total darkness. Only a sliver of light came from the crack under the door. And then, even that light vanished. Victoria had turned off the stairwell light. Liam fumbled in the dark until he found Sophia and pulled her into a hug. It's okay," he repeated, but his own voice was trembling uncontrollably. Sophia, still under the mild effect of the sedative, wasn't crying, just shaking. Liam took the thin blanket and wrapped it around both of them, but it was like trying to get warm with a piece of paper. The cold from the concrete rose through their clothes, seeped into their skin, and reached their bones. He looked up and saw the old thermometer hanging on the wall, 35F. Their breath began to form clouds of vapor. "Mommy is coming to get us," Sophia whispered for the first time in weeks, her consciousness muddled by the medication and trauma. Liam squeezed his eyes shut to keep from crying. "Yes, sis. Someone will come get us. Someone has to come." Above them, the party was reaching its peak of perfection. Dom Pérignon champagne flowed freely. The string quartet played Christmas classics. Victoria circulated among the guests like a natural hostess, laughing at the right moments, making strategic connections. The city councilman commented to Richard, "Your wife is exceptional. You are so lucky." Richard, proud, replied, "She's turned our house into a real home." No one noticed that the perfect hostess was checking her watch every 15 minutes, calculating how much longer she had to maintain the charade. But someone was paying attention. Robert, following his security protocol, was making his periodic rounds of all floors of the mansion, checking windows, doors, and potential vulnerabilities. At 9:15 p.m., he went down to the basement via the external service stairs, the route he used to check the generator and heating system. That's when he heard it. A muffled sound, almost imperceptible under the music bleeding from upstairs. He stopped, held his breath, and listened carefully. Crying. It was a child's cry, coming from inside the basement, from behind the locked door. His police training kicked in immediately. Someone was trapped in there. And given the temperature shown on the external thermostat, whoever it was in real danger. Robert ran upstairs, but discreetly. He found Mrs. Gable, who was in the pantry organizing more wine bottles. "Clara, I need to talk to you now. It's urgent," he whispered, pulling her into the most isolated corner of the kitchen. "The children. Liam and Sophia. They're locked in the basement. I heard them crying. The thermostat reads 35F down there." Mrs. Gable felt her legs weaken. This was the moment she had feared and secretly waited for months. The time to choose, protect her job or protect those children. She looked into Robert's eyes and saw her own son reflected there. "We have to tell Mr. Blackwood. Now. No matter what happens to us." Meanwhile, in the icy basement, Liam made the bravest decision of his 8-year-old life. Sophia was shivering so violently that he knew, even without fully understanding, that she was becoming hypothermic. He had always been obedient, always been afraid, always followed the rules to protect his sister. But now, obedience could kill her. He picked up a metal pipe he found fumbling in the darker remnant of some old construction and began to bang on the metal door. "Help, we're down here, please, someone, my sister is sick." He banged until his hands ached. He banged until his voice was hoarse. He banged as if each strike was a scream piercing through the concrete. "See us, hear us, save us." In the main hall, it was exactly 9:30 p.m. when Richard Blackwood stepped onto a small improvised stage to make the traditional Christmas toast. The string quartet stopped playing. 50 guests raised their crystal glasses. "I would like to thank you all for being here on this very special night," Richard began, emotional, "and to toast to what really matters, family." It was precisely in that pause, in that second of silence between phrases, that it happened. A muffled but perceptible shout echoed from somewhere below. A few guests glanced down, confused. "Did you hear that?" a woman whispered to her husband. Victoria turned pale instantly, and it was at that exact moment that Robert, unable to wait any longer, strode across the hall and whispered in Richard's ear, "Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to talk to you about your children. It's an emergency. The children are in danger. Now." Richard stepped down from the stage, confused and irritated, the microphone still in his hand. "Robert, can this wait? I'm in the middle of the toast." But the security guard didn't budge, his rigid ex-cop posture saying more than words. "No, sir, it can't. Your children are locked in the basement. They've been there for over an hour. The temperature is 35°F. I heard them crying." The sound of those words cut through the hall's murmur like a blade. Richard blinked, processing, trying to make sense of it. "That's impossible. They're asleep. Victoria put them to—" He looked at his wife, who had quickly approached. "Honey, what is this nonsense?" Victoria played her last card of manipulation, her voice smooth but firm. "Robert, have you been drinking? The children are in their rooms, asleep. You must have heard the catering staff in the service area." But Mrs. Gable, who had followed Robert, finally found her voice after months of being suffocated. "No, ma'am. I saw you take them to the basement. I saw it with my own eyes, and it's not the first time you've hurt those children." The silence that fell over the nearby guests was deafening. Richard looked from the housekeeper to his wife, and something in his expression shifted, the first crack in his denial. Robert didn't wait for permission. "With all due respect, Mr. Blackwood, I'm opening that basement now, with or without your authorization. If I'm wrong, fire me. But if I'm right—" He left the sentence hanging and walked purposefully toward the kitchen door. A few guests, sensing something extraordinary was happening, began to follow. Victoria tried to block his path. "This is ridiculous. You're drunk, Robert. This is trespassing. I'll have you—" But Richard cut her off, his voice sounding strange, as if it belonged to someone else. "Open the basement. Open it now." Robert took the emergency tool he always carried on his belter, multi-purpose pry bar, and descended the steps leading to the basement door. There were already about 15 people crowded at the top of the stairs. The padlock was heavy duty, but Robert had broken through stronger doors during his years on the force. 3 sharp strikes, and the padlock gave way. The lock on the door was easier. He forced it with the pry bar until the mechanism broke. The metal door swung open with a high-pitched creak, and then the scene no one would ever forget. Liam was standing, wrapped around Sophia, both of them shivering so violently they looked like they were convulsing. The thin blanket lay forgotten on the floor. Both of their lips had a frightening purplish hue. Sophia was semi-conscious, her eyes half closed, her breathing shallow. The wave of cold that washed over the top of the stairs was biting, that damp, winter basement chill that seeps into you instantly. Liam, seeing the light flood the darkness and the faces at the top of the stairs, gathered his last strength and whispered with a voice raw from screaming, "She did it on purpose, Dad. She always did. Always." Richard stumbled down the steps 2 at a time and fell to his knees before his children. "My God, my God, my God," was all he could repeat as he tried to hug them, but they were stiff with cold. That's when Marissa, the grandmother, reached the door. She had been in the restroom and missed the start of the commotion. When she saw her grandchildren in that state, an animalistic scream tore from her throat. "What did you do to my babies?" She rushed down, wrapping them both in her own wool shawl, rubbing their little arms, trying to bring back circulation. Mrs. Gable, from the top of the stairs, started talking and couldn't stop. The words poured out like an urgent confession. "She's been doing this for months. She's been mistreating these children since you got married, taking away their food, locking them in the dark, giving them medicine to keep them quiet. I saw everything. I saw it and I was a coward. I didn't report it. But as God is my witness, I won't be silent anymore. These children suffer every single day you leave this house." She collapsed into tears, years of silent complicity finally erupting in desperate words. Robert was already on the phone with emergency services. "I need an ambulance, urgent. 2 children with hypothermia. Blackwood Manor, Golden Gates Estate. But before he hung up, he added something his police instinct told him to. And send a squad car. There are signs of severe abuse and neglect. When he hung up, he saw someone was filming with a cell phone one of the invited businessmen, too shocked to lower his phone. The scene was being documented. There would be no denying it, no rewriting it, no hiding it. Victoria, realizing there was no way out, tried one last time. They were being punished, they were being extremely disobedient. Richard, you know how difficult they are, how manipulative. The psychologist said firm boundaries. But her voice died when Richard turned from the bottom of the stairs. His expression wasn't angry, it was worse. It was the look of someone who had finally seen the truth he had been avoiding for months. You, he began, his voice trembling, you did this to my children. On Christmas Eve, while I was upstairs celebrating like a complete fool. Sophia, semi-conscious in her grandmother's arms, began to murmur, I want my mommy. I want my real mommy. Not her. Not her. Liam, though hypothermic, though exhausted, gathered the strength to look up at the guests at the top of the stairs, all those important people, witnesses at last, and said loud enough for everyone to hear, She always did this, Dad, ever since you married her. We tried to tell you. Nobody believed us. Nobody listened. But now you're all seeing. Everyone is seeing. His voice broke on the last word and he finally collapsed, all the weeks of being strong, too soon finally taking their toll. The ambulance arrived quickly in 8 minutes, but the police arrived with them, and as the paramedics went up with the children wrapped in thermal blankets, the officers went down to the basement to document the scene. One of them, a 20-year veteran, looked around, saw the thermometer reading 35F, saw the ridiculously thin blanket on the floor, and muttered to his partner, This is negligent homicide. Kids die from hypothermia in these temperatures. Richard, following his children's gurneys, stopped when he heard those words. Negligent homicide. The words echoed in his mind as he looked at Victoria, who was being invited by the officers to accompany them for questioning. At 10:05 p.m. on Christmas Eve 2024, Victoria Ashford Blackwood was taken into custody in front of 50 guests from the city's business and political elite. She was handcuffed in her own entrance hall under the 15-foot Christmas tree she had personally chosen. The flashes of cell phones captured everything, the perfect woman in her $30,000 ball gown, being led away by police while screaming, You're making a mistake. I'm the victim here. Those children manipulated all of you. I am the victim. But no one was listening, because 50 people had just seen with their own eyes 2 children being carried out on stretchers, shivering with hypothermia, nearly unconscious. The evidence was beyond any manipulation. Richard rode in the ambulance, sitting between his children's gurneys. Before the doors closed, he looked back and saw his house, that perfect mansion, that perfect party, that perfect life he had built. And he understood that he had built it all on a lie that almost cost his children their lives. Marissa held his hand and said only, Now you rebuild, the right way. The ambulance doors closed, the sirens wailed, and Richard Blackwood finally allowed himself to cry, not just for his children's pain, but for the blindness that had put them there. Christmas morning dawned differently at St. Luke's Hospital. Liam and Sophia were in adjacent rooms in the pediatric wing, connected by an internal door that Richard had insisted remain open. The hypothermia had been treated without any lasting physical damage. The doctors had acted quickly enough. But the child psychiatrist who evaluated them the next morning was clear. The psychological trauma is significant. They will need intensive therapy, possibly for years, but children are incredibly resilient when placed in a safe environment. Richard, who hadn't left their side since they were admitted, just nodded. It was the first time in months that his children had slept without fear, even if it was in hospital beds. The legal consequences for Victoria came swiftly and devastatingly. She was indicted for aggravated child abuse, felony neglect with risk of death, unlawful imprisonment, and negligent homicide. Hypothermia in children at that temperature could have been fatal within hours. The police investigation, which began on Christmas morning itself, uncovered a history Richard knew nothing about. Victoria had prior cases in another state for marriage fraud. She had done this before, marrying wealthy men, manipulating and extracting what she could. At the bail hearing, The judge denied bail. The flight risk is evident and the severity of the crimes does not permit provisional release. Richard confronted his own guilt in therapy sessions that began the very first week after the incident. I chose my work above all else. I chose a new life, a new wife without really knowing her. I ignored the signs. My children paid the price for my blindness, he confessed to the therapist, his voice heavy with a remorse that would never fully disappear. The therapist was gentle but direct. Acknowledgement is the first step. Guilt without action is useless. Now you rebuild their trust day by day, choice by choice. Richard completely restructured his life. He cut back his travel by 80%, hired an operational CEO to manage the company's day-to-day, and blocked off every morning and evening to be present with Liam and Sophia. Mrs. Gable resigned twice out of the crushing guilt she carried. I saw and did nothing for months. I don't deserve to keep caring for these children, she said through tears. But Richard refused her resignation both times. You acted when it mattered most. At the decisive moment, you found your courage and helped save them. That counts. Robert received not only gratitude, but a promotion to head of security for all Blackwood properties, with a significant salary increase. Both learned lessons they would carry forever. Silence is complicity. I will never again ignore a sign of abuse, even if it costs me my job, Mrs. Gable swore to herself in the mirror, and she would keep that promise for the rest of her life. The story leaked to the press the day after Christmas. One of the guests sold the video he had filmed to a news portal. Within 48 hours, it went viral nationwide. Cruel stepmother locks, stepchildren in freezing basement during luxury Christmas party, children rescued with hypothermia. The video showed the exact moment Liam and Sophia were carried from the basement, and the image of two shivering children with purple lips being wrapped in thermal blankets shocked the country. On social media, the hashtag Believe the Children went viral. Police departments across the nation reported a 340% increase in domestic abuse reports the following week, people finally finding the courage to speak up, inspired by the Blackwood siblings' story. 3 months later, life began to find a new normal. Liam started smiling again. Not the forced smile Victoria demanded, but a genuine smile when his father picked him up from school every day. He saw a child trauma specialist twice a week, and slowly he reconnected with the child he had been forced to leave behind. Sophia gradually regained her speech. The first words she said spontaneously, without being asked, were, "Dad, can I draw?" Richard cried and bought her a case with 200 colored pencils. Her first drawing was of 4 people. She wrote underneath in a shaky hand, "My real family, Grandma, Daddy, Liam, and me." Richard framed it and hung it in the main living room, replacing the fake, perfect Christmas photo that had been on a magazine cover. The case inspired concrete changes beyond the Blackwood family. A bill was introduced in the city council, then the state legislature, requiring mandatory training to identify signs of abuse in schools, residential communities, and establishments that work with children. Robert became a volunteer speaker at security and domestic service training courses on the responsibility to not be a bystander when witnessing demands action. Mrs. Gable began working part-time for the Blackwood family and volunteering part-time at a support network for child victims of domestic abuse. Both transformed their pain and guilt into purpose, ensuring that Liam and Sophia's story would save other children. The following Christmas was radically different. No lavish party, no VIP guest list, no 15-foot tree. Richard, Liam, Sophia, their grandmother Marissa, Mrs. Gable, and Robert gathered for an intimate dinner in the living room. The tree was modest, decorated with ornaments the children had made in occupational therapy. The meal was simple: turkey, rice, stuffing, and Sophia's favorite dessert, caramel flan. Liam, now 9 and with a maturity he should never have had to develop, raised his glass of grape juice. "To the Christmas when we were finally heard," Sophia added, her voice still soft but growing stronger every day. "And saved." Richard, with tears flowing freely, added, "And to real family, which isn't always blood, but is always love." Victoria was serving an 8-year sentence in a closed-regime state penitentiary for women. In June of the following year, she received a letter with no return address. When she opened it, She recognized the neat handwriting. It was from Liam. I hope you learn what we've learned this past year. Pain teaches, but only love truly heals. One day I'll be able to forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. Forgiving doesn't mean forgetting. It means you will no longer have power over me. Victoria read the letter 3 times. For the first time in her entire life, the real dimension of what she had done, the trauma she inflicted on 2 innocent children, finally broke through her armor of justifications. She wept. It was too late to change the past. But for the first time, the truth had reached her. This story reminds us of uncomfortable but essential truths. Abuse thrives in the silence and inaction of those who see but choose not to act. Children deserve to be heard, always, even when they accuse respected adults. Employees, neighbors, teachers, security guards, we are all guardians of the children around us. A door opened in time can save lives. Prolonged silence can destroy them. Sometimes the most perfect parties, the most flawless families on social media hide the deepest pains in the places no one looks. But when the truth is finally exposed, when witnesses find courage, when children are finally heard, healing can begin. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave your like, and comment on which part of this story impacted you the most. Your story matters too. We'll see you in the next one. And remember, if you see something, say something always.